When 22-year-old student Mindy Morgenstern suddenly stopped responding to messages and phone calls, her friends immediately became worried. Only a few hours later, Mindy's body was found inside her apartment. What the attacker had done to her was truly horrific. However, he left behind many small traces that helped investigators find him and determine exactly what had happened. It also turned out that the man who had taken Mindy's life had already been convicted several times for violent crimes. This crime took place in a city called Valley City in Barnes County in the state of North Dakota. Valley City is a tiny city with no more than 7,000 residents. It is a quiet place without major attractions, and in general, it does not draw much attention from tourists or the wider public. But that changed in the early autumn of 2006. On September 13, 2006, two of Mindy Morgenstern's friends, Tone Baumann and Danielle Holmstromsey, decided to visit her after she suddenly stopped communicating. Normally, she answered calls and messages right away, so her silence immediately caused concern. Her friends also knew that Mindy suffered from multiple sclerosis, so they went to check on her without hesitation, hoping to make sure everything was all right. When Tony and Danielle arrived, they knocked on the door. But again, there was only silence. Not knowing what else to do, they decided to try the door handle, and to their surprise, the door was not locked. Sadly, a terrifying sight was waiting for them just behind the door. Only a couple of steps from the entrance lay Mindy's lifeless body, and something was wrapped around her neck. Almost immediately, her friends realized that the young woman was already dead. The terrible news of Mindy's death quickly spread through the city, and soon police officers and detectives arrived at the crime scene. When they entered the home, investigators smelled a strong and distinct odor of pine sol, a cleaner commonly used in many American households. Because of that, one of the first questions that came to mind was whether the killer had tried to destroy evidence. During the examination of the body, police discovered that someone had stabbed Mindy in the neck with such force that the blade broke and remained lodged in her body. But in addition to the knife, the attacker had also used a belt to strangle the victim. After quickly confirming the identity of the 22-year-old young woman as Mindy Morgenstern, police officers went almost immediately to her family's home in New Salem to deliver the tragic news. Her older sister was the first to learn of the young woman's death, and her reaction was exactly what one would expect. A broken heart, pain, confusion, and anger were only some of the emotions Mindy's sister felt in that moment. Investigators were facing a difficult task. They had to find and arrest the person who had committed this terrible crime as quickly as possible. Mindy had been attacked and killed directly inside her apartment. Therefore, police first had to determine whether it had been a robbery, since that is the most common motive in crimes of this kind. Mindy's apartment was located on the second floor of a typical low-rise apartment complex, which meant it would have been much harder for the attacker to enter her apartment than the apartments of her neighbors on the first floor. As for the layout of the apartment, directly behind the front door was a long, narrow hallway filled with Mindy's shoes. To the right was her room, and a little farther to the left was the living room. The television, telephone, medication, and other valuables were still inside the apartment, which completely ruled out theft as a possible motive. Mindy's body was also found in the middle of the apartment, between the hallway, the living room, and the bedroom. This could have meant that she had been dragged into the apartment and had not been attacked while already standing there. But again, all of Mindy's belongings were still with her. So, what was the reason for the attack? And who could have done something so terrible? Before we get into the investigation itself, we should first explain more about who Mindy was. Mindy Morgenstern was born on April 29, 1984, in Bogotá, Colombia. She had an older brother and older sisters. However, a tragedy occurred in her biological family, and the details were not made public. Eventually, Mindy was adopted by Larry and Eunice Morgenstern. That is how she came to them, while her family settled in New Salem, only about an hour's drive from the place where Mindy later died. Mindy's friends and family described her as a caring and sociable young woman who was always eager to help others. After graduating from New Salem High School, Mindy studied physical education at Valley City State University. In 2006, she was in her final year of college and planned to pursue a career in sports. She loved basketball, was well known on local courts, and her childhood hero was Michael Jordan. All of this left no doubt about which sport she wanted to connect her life with. Sadly, it seemed that Mindy might have to give up those plans. The devastating diagnosis of multiple sclerosis severely limited her abilities in every sport. But Mindy did not allow the illness to stop her. She continued to stay active, coached a local basketball team, and worked as a lifeguard. Because of her illness, she lived in her own apartment rather than in a student dormitory. This separation was a way for her to manage her condition and the risks connected to the disease. The truth is that at the time of her death, Mindy was taking medication similar to chemotherapy, which her especially vulnerable to common illnesses she could catch from other people. In addition to her active social life and her education, Mindy also attended church services and played several musical instruments. She was an incredible person, actively involved in the life of her city and her community, and she cared deeply about others. Sadly, that beautiful and active life was cruelly ended by a brutal criminal. While Mindy's loved ones mourned her, investigators worked tirelessly to build a timeline of events, hoping it would help them find her killer. Investigators determined that nothing had been stolen from the apartment where the body was found, not even Mindy's purse, which was found near her. Through interviews with friends and family members, investigators learned that Mindy had spent time with her boyfriend the night before returning home shortly after midnight. Mindy's boyfriend was removed from the list of suspects after he showed investigators that she had called him that morning to tell him she planned to meet a friend at the library in the afternoon. The library computer system showed that Mindy had indeed been there and had logged off the computer shortly before 12:30 p.m. More precisely, records later showed that she logged off at about 12:23 p.m. After that, she went toward her apartment. This was confirmed through surveillance footage and witness statements. After that, however, nothing more is known with certainty about what happened to her. At about 12:47 p.m., contact with her stopped. No one saw her, and she did not appear on any surveillance recordings after that point. At 9 p.m. that same day, Mindy's friends arrived at her apartment and found her lifeless. Based on the timeline of that day, investigators determined that she had died sometime between 12:45 p.m. and 1:30 p.m. Investigators believed that she had been attacked immediately after arriving home, right after entering the apartment. Now they had to find the killer. But that was not an easy task. Mindy was very well liked by everyone who knew her, and everyone police spoke with seemed to have a reliable alibi. Mindy was first strangled with a belt, and then her throat was brutally cut, leaving a knife blade lodged in her neck. During the forensic examination, investigators found foreign DNA under the victim's fingernails. Police immediately suspected that it belonged to the attacker, and ultimately, this clue became crucial evidence. Fortunately, investigators were able to determine quickly whose DNA it was. Only about a week after the discovery of the body, the main suspect was identified and arrested. The suspect was Mindy's neighbor, a man named Mo Gibbs. Despite investigators' suspicions, Mo initially appeared to have an alibi. He also worked as a correctional officer at the Barnes County Jail. It is worth noting that applicants for such a position are normally carefully checked for criminal records and psychological fitness. The fact that he worked there after such screening surprised investigators. The alibi he initially gave authorities was soon disproven. At first, the man claimed that he had not even been near the apartment building on the day Mindy died. He said that he had been moving that day with his pregnant wife. Although part of that story was true, no one could confirm the man's location during certain periods of time that day, so investigators decided to look deeper. The investigation into the background revealed that he was far from as innocent as he wanted to appear. Very soon, gaps appeared in the information about his identity and his life, and investigators had to fill them in. It turned out that Mo Gibbs was not the man's original legal name. In fact, his name had been Glendale Morgan Jr., and he had changed it only 1 year before the events described here. Glendale had previously been an amateur boxer and, sometime later, had joined the Navy. His service in the Navy, however, was short-lived. The man carried out a deliberate attempted murder against one of his fellow servicemen. For that crime, Mo was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but he was released early on parole after serving only 5 years. Once again, early parole played an important role in the life of both the offender and his victim. This was far from the first case in which a person convicted of violence was released and almost immediately committed another attack. The name change in 2005 was most likely an attempt to hide the conviction connected to that earlier crime. In fact, he succeeded. Neither his wife nor his employers at the jail knew about it. Police also learned more details about Mo's private life. It turned out that as early as 1991, when both were 18 years old, Mo had been married to a woman named Tasha. After his arrest in 1993, Tasha stayed with him and had a child with him, but in 1997, shortly before his release, she filed for divorce. In 2002, Mo married again, this time to a woman named Melissa. However, that marriage also ended after only 3 years, in 2005. What is interesting is that although the two were still married, records show that 2 other women filed child support claims against Mo for children born in 2003. It therefore seems that this man was not only a criminal, but also actively unfaithful to his wife. Later, police found out that at least 5 women had requested child support from Mo even before he moved to North Dakota. In North Dakota, he met Jody, who was his wife at the time of Mindy's death. Jody claimed that Mo had admitted to her that he had a criminal record, but that he had not told her the real reason he had been imprisoned. As for his alibi, Mo claimed that he had worked at the Barnes County Jail until 7 o'clock that morning, between about 12:30 p.m. and 12:40 p.m. He drove Jody to work and then returned home to pack his belongings. Unfortunately for him, this matched exactly the time when Mindy was expected to arrive home and when contact with her stopped. Naturally, this information immediately caught investigators' attention. The autopsy report concluded that the probable time of death was between 12:30 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., which made Mo's possible involvement in her death even more likely. After that, investigators performed a DNA analysis on the material found under the young woman's fingernails. It turned out that it fully matched Mo's DNA. In addition, during questioning, investigators noticed that the man had fresh cuts on his hands, most likely caused by Mindy while she was trying to save herself. But the case did not end there. After it was confirmed that the DNA under Mindy's fingernails matched Mo's DNA, investigators discovered that his DNA also matched traces left by the offender in another case in the city of Fargo, not far from Valley City. In 2004, there had been a sexual assault case there. At the time, the offender could not be found, but now it seemed he would finally be held responsible for that crime. It is worth noting that Mo voluntarily gave his DNA for analysis. Therefore, it is unclear what exactly he expected. Given the physical evidence in the form of DNA, his proximity to the crime scene, the injuries on his hands, and his prior convictions, investigators believed they had finally found the killer. They also believed they had gathered all the evidence needed to prove his guilt in court. So, on September 21, 2006, Mo Gibbs was arrested for first-degree murder and was denied the right to be released on bail. But the man decided to harm Mindy again in another way. 5 days after his arrest, he declared that he was innocent, which meant he would have to stand trial. Fortunately, the prosecution was prepared for that turn of events and had already prepared the necessary evidence as well as additional charges. Several new and serious charges were filed against Mo. Among them were charges connected to his work. A total of 5 female inmates at the Barnes County Jail accused Mo of sexual assault, leading to several additional criminal charges. Because of the enormous attention this case attracted, the first trial was moved to Minnow and began in mid-2007. The first trial ended in June of that same year. However, even after more than 20 hours of deliberation, the jury could not reach a verdict. The prosecution portrayed Mo as a sexual predator and suggested that he had also tried to attack Mindy that day. But when she fought back, he decided to kill her in order to avoid another accusation. The defense, however, tried to refute that claim by questioning the reliability of the DNA analysis and emphasizing that fingerprints found at the crime scene did not match Mo Gibbs. In October of the same year, a new trial began, this time in Bismarck. This time, the jury reached a verdict and found Mo Gibbs guilty of Mindy's death. The man was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After that, Mo continued to insist on his innocence and even addressed Mindy's family. He said that his heart and prayers were with the Morgenstern family, that it was a terrible crime that never should have happened, and that he was sorry it had happened. Mindy's mother responded by saying that she forgave Mo, but added that she would never forget what he had done to her daughter. She then expressed compassion for the man's family and his children. Although Mo never confessed to killing Mindy, he did plead guilty in the previously unsolved Fargo case, and he also pleaded guilty to all charges of sexual assault committed at his workplace. The prosecution believed that Mo's actions showed a struggle with sexual addiction. But it is also worth mentioning that one of the assaults against inmates occurred on the same day Mindy was killed. As a result, Mo was also found guilty and sentenced for sexual assaults against 5 inmates at the jail, with those assaults taking place between May and September of 2006. In addition, he was also convicted in the previously unsolved Fargo case. For those offenses, Mo received additional prison sentences. All of his sentences were ordered to run at the same time. The crimes committed by Mo deeply shocked those around him. Many had known him as a dedicated, disciplined athlete who cared for his children. Mo Gibbs remains incarcerated in North Dakota. Despite their immense emotional pain, Mindy's adoptive parents found the strength to forgive. Eunice said that through forgiveness, they acknowledged what Mo had done, but rejected unnecessary hatred. Eunice channeled her grief into writing and later published a book titled Mindy. Although nothing can bring Mindy back, her family and friends find comfort in knowing that Mo can no longer harm anyone. Mindy Morgenstern was buried at Graceland Cemetery in New Salem, not far from the place where she had grown up. The people who knew Mindy promised to remember her as she had been in life, kind, sincere, and full of enthusiasm. The young woman's family created a heart-shaped memorial near their home with her name on it. To this day, that memorial stands as a reminder of what a kind and beloved person Mindy was. Thank you for watching, and take care.